The Alabama Crimson Tide are losing the greatest coach of all time in Nick Saban, replacing him with former Washington coach Kalen DeBoer. Will they be able to replicate the success they had under Nick Saban? Let's find out. The strengths of this team are in their roster talent. They consistently recruit either the best or second best class in the country every year, and the depth of talent on this roster is second to none. And then the run game should be very strong. They have a stable of running backs that I think could be very good. The O line last year was great in run blocking and should be again this year. And then quarterback Jalen Milroe is also a threat with his legs. That just adds to the how good this run game is at Alabama. The weaknesses are potentially at wide receiver. Jeremy Bernard transfers in from Washington, is projected to be the number one. But last year at Washington, he was more like a number 4 when everyone was healthy, maybe a 3 when they weren't. So that's not ideal in my opinion. Ryan Williams does come in as a true freshman, so we'll see how good he is right away. And then the other question marks are in the secondary, where you lose Caleb Downs to Ohio State, but you still have Malachi Moore, who's a great safety. But yeah, so questions in the secondary, especially the second safety. So maybe a team with a really good passing attack could cause some problems for Alabama. You open up the season with Western Kentucky. That's a win. And then you play USF, who's actually pretty good this year, in my opinion, when I evaluate them. And obviously, or if you remember, last year, the USF game was a lot closer than people thought it would be. Don't think that's the case this year. You win, and you get a pretty big non-conference game on the road against Wisconsin. Wisconsin will be trying to use the air raid this year with Tyler Van Dyke at quarterback. And even if last year it was more of a hybrid offense, they're trying to go full air raid this year. I don't think it's going to be quite as effective as it will in the future, especially in the early stages of the season. And I think Alabama will win fairly comfortably. Then you get a bye before your biggest game of the season, the Georgia Bulldogs at home in Tuscaloosa. Alabama's had a lot of success recently against Georgia with Nick Saban. You only lost one game. It was a really big game in the national title. But you've also beaten Georgia in the national title. Last year you beat them in the SEC championship game. But now it's a new staff. It's Kalen DeBoer. It's not Nick Saban. Will Kirby Smart show that he's clearly Georgia surpassed Alabama now that Nick Saban's gone? Or will Alabama continue to be a thorn in the side of the Georgia Bulldogs? I think Alabama's going to get it done at home, and Kalen DeBoer they're going to announce themselves as still right there with Georgia at the top of the SEC and maybe the best program in the SEC, even with Nick Saban gone. I then think you destroy Vanderbilt, unfortunately. I like Vanderbilt, but they will get crushed. And then home game against South Carolina will also be a pretty easy win. And you reach bowl eligibility at 6-0, just 6 games into the season. Now, third Saturday in October, huge game at Tennessee. Nico, I think, probably has a big game here. Last time we saw this game, goalposts were in the river, instant classic. Alabama barely lost to Tennessee. Or last time we saw this game in Neyland, what I mean to say. Last year, Alabama won. But I think this year, Kalen DeBoer there. We'll see. Can Josh Heupel get the early edge on him? I think it's going to have fireworks. I see a lot of points happening. But I think Alabama's defense will make more stops than Tennessee's. I think it's just better defense. And even on the road, that's just what I'm leaning with. And then I think Missouri, who I think at this point, if you see my Missouri prediction, I think both teams will be 7-0. Probably both maybe top 5, but at least top 10 matchup here. I think it'll be huge. A lot of hype around it, but I think it'll be kind of a letdown. I think Alabama will pretty convincingly beat Missouri. I think Missouri will keep it close because of their passing attack against Alabama secondary that's not the strongest, but Alabama I think will move the ball on the ground enough and have a lot of time of possession, because I don't think Missouri's defensive line will hold up the best against Alabama's offensive line in that run game and Jalen Milroe running around. And then, so I think they'll kind of control the ball, and Missouri will just wear down over the course of the game, and eventually Alabama will pull away. Then you get a bye, and then I think you beat LSU on the road off of the bye. Both teams have a bye before this, so actually in neither bye does Alabama get a rest advantage. But I do think they're both good spots because I think getting to prepare for Georgia is good, and then after Tennessee and Missouri, I think pretty tough games, I would say. It's good to get rest before LSU, even if it's not necessarily a rest advantage, since both teams will be rested. But Alabama, I think, will beat LSU just because LSU, I think, is too bad defensively this year, and even their offense, will put up points against Alabama. But this is another team I think Alabama can control the time of possession against, and basically keep the ball away from enough where LSU tires out over the course of the game, and eventually Alabama will pull away, and then they'll beat Mercer very easily. And then I think what'll be a very tricky game against Oklahoma. Oklahoma's biggest home game in SEC play against a really good passing attack that I think can challenge the secondary. I think a defensive line and linebacker core and actually pretty solid defense that can hold up more against Alabama's rushing attack than either LSU or Missouri, who I thought were best equipped to expose Alabama in the secondary. Tennessee is pretty well equipped as well, but then they have solid defensive line. But I think Oklahoma will not allow Alabama to completely dominate time of possession. And with their biggest home game of the SEC, I think it's going to be a really tough environment for Alabama. I know they're probably used to that, but still, I think it'll be a tough place to play. I think Jackson Arnold has one of his best games of the year here. I think Alabama drops this game to Oklahoma, but I do think they win the Iron Bowl. I don't think Auburn's a great team this year, certainly not on Alabama's level. I think they're improving, but not this year. Do I think they'll beat Alabama? Although you never know what could happen in the Iron Bowl. But I think Alabama will finish 11-1. I got them headed to the SEC championship. Make sure you watch my full SEC predictions video to check out my final prediction for who will win the SEC title and the final standings of all the SEC. Thank you for watching.